I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creepin' and crawlin'. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and you are fortunate enough to have tuned into the show For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and environment. We talk about them in the way they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness. And this is the day after we finally discovered who the president-elect of the state of Ohio is, or excuse me, of the United States of America is, not just the state of Ohio. And I think this might be a show where people might want to call in at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. This is the best show in Ohio, but it gets better every time you call. And we've had some technical difficulties the last couple of weeks. You folks haven't been able to call, so I just know your environmental and ecological questions have been building up. And I'm wondering about your opinions about the results of this election in terms of the environment. Do you think it's going to be a good thing that Biden has won, or do you think it's going to be a bad thing, or do you think it's not going to have any effect? How are you feeling personally about what happened there? And, we like to look at things from the ecological view here at For a Green Future. So please don't hesitate to call in, 866-240-1065. So it was, of course, a very interesting election cycle, and the environment did come up as one of the campaign issues for both parties. And it's just an interesting time. We're having gorgeous weather up here in Northwest Ohio. That's not true everywhere in the world, as we're going to be talking about in a later part of the show. In fact, let me just go over what the show is supposed to be today. We have a guest lined up. Her name is Cathy Cowan-Becker, and she's going to be talking about two cities in Ohio that during the election passed resolutions calling for those cities to go to 100% renewable energy by 2023. And so we're really looking forward to her call. I had a little trouble getting a hold of her this morning. I'm not sure. She may have been one of those people that perhaps celebrated a little too hard last night. I know there's some people that may not be getting up first thing this morning. But she's scheduled to come on at 8:15. Then, of course, we'll hear from our advertisers. Then we have some interesting ecological news and information, and our letter from the future. Our co-host, Rebecca Wood, thankfully will be joining us again this week, maybe in just a few minutes. And at some point, hopefully, we'll hear from you at 866-240-1065. This show, of course, for this 1 hour, normally this is a sports station, and we just got done listening to Black and White Sports, a great sports show. And right after this, we've got Mick Gonzalez coming on with the cheap seats. But just for this hour or so, let's think about the environment. Let's think about nature, that big ecological team that we're all actually on, that we're all in the environment, we're all mixed up in the ecology. So this is sort of the home team, is the Earth team, is all the plants and animals and critters and everything on the planet, sort of our teammates in this big game here that we're playing called survival. And I ran into a critter that was involved in that survival game kind of unexpectedly this past week. I was sitting in the backyard of a friend. We were just visiting there, sitting in the backyard, socially distanced. That's the way it's done these days. And a huge buck just strolled into the yard with a big rack. I think it's what they would call an 8-point rack. And he was as surprised to see us as we were to see him. I mean, my friend's backyard is a little bit overgrown, and it's got bushes all the way around it and shrubs all the way around it. So it's a nice secluded spot. So if you're a deer living in the city, this is right in the middle of the city of Bowling Green, and you sort of want a place to hang out and just kind of be safe from prying eyes for a while. His yard is usually a good spot, but that particular day, he and I were both sitting out there, and the deer strolled up and looked up and saw us, and we looked over and saw it, and I was like, "How you doing?" And it looked like it considered joining us for a minute there, but then it turned around and ran off down the street. And it's just a reminder that nature really is all around us, and if we give it the slightest chance, it's going to survive, and it's going to help us survive, because everything all these critters are doing, all these plants are doing, all these bacteria and fungi, they're all cooperating to keep the planet habitable. And if we can give them the space they need to survive, that's good for us too. So I wanted to talk about how the will of the people comes into that, because deep down, I think all of us, Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter. We all want to live in a healthy, clean environment. We all want to have clean air and clean water and see eagles every now and then. And this is something that is universal. And the election results, I think, bear that out to a degree, because I believe that a lot of people did vote based on environmental concerns this time. But there are other election results besides the presidential that really drive this point home, and we're going to be talking more about those later. And like I said, hopefully we'll be talking with Cathy Cowan-Becker at 8:15. But I just wanted to describe something that happened. I was doing the research for the show, and I just changed computers. Now I have a new computer with Windows 10 on it. And Microsoft Edge, the Microsoft browser there, helpfully puts itself on the computer and asserts itself as your default browser. And if you use it, it also puts Microsoft search engine Bing as the default search engine. And I've been sort of going along with it just to see what would happen. And what happened this time is Bing could not find the Columbus referendum for 100% renewable energy. I mean, I searched for it a couple different which ways, and Bing didn't direct me to any stories about this big, important issue, because, when the largest city in Ohio says we're going to go 100% renewable by 2023, that's a big deal. That's a lot of energy being generated by wind and solar specifically, and not nuclear. And of course, the founder of Microsoft, Bill Gates, he is all in on nuclear. He really wants nukes. In fact, he just, quote unquote, floated a proposal that ocean shipping should be all converted to nuclear energy. So we should have all these floating nuclear power plants coming into our bays, and maybe like the ones we have here in Toledo, we have grain silos, and people come on in and they park. You can see them on I-75 when you come in, and unloading and loading grain there at the docks. And Bill Gates wants those to be nuclear power plants. He wants them to be nuclear powered at the very time when we're discovering that they can be solar powered, and they can be combination solar and wind, and you can use wind to generate the electricity to charge the batteries to run the plant. There's all kinds of innovative things happening to shipping right now, and Bill Gates wants to throw them back to the dreams of the 1950s. And so it's not too surprising to me that his search engine, the search engine from for his company, couldn't find something that talks about using wind and solar power to power the country and to power the future, because his vision of the future is a 1950s vision of the future with nukes everywhere. And that's not one that I think most of us share, and I think that came through. And so, Russell, I see we got a call. Who have we got on the line there? Yes. Our guest. All right. Well, it's just about time to go talk to her. So we're going to talk to Cathy Cowan-Becker. Hello, Ms. Becker. Are you on the line with us?
I sure am. Hello.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us so early. So, Cathy, there was some news for the country yesterday in terms of election results, but you had gotten some very good news earlier in the week, right after the election. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So we have very good news for renewable energy in Central Ohio. We had 2 ballot initiatives, one in Columbus and one in the suburb of Grove City. Both were for energy aggregation for 100% renewable energy. And so both of them passed by a landslide. In Columbus, it passed by 75%, and in Grove City, it passed by 63%. And this is also noteworthy because Grove City is a Republican suburb. It's majority Republican, and Columbus is, heavily Democrat. So it's able to pass, in either type of city. And so that is really good news.
Yeah, that's great news. I mean, we always say here on For a Green Future, we believe that everybody, regardless of party or political affiliation, wants a clean environment. And so the support for wind and solar is great. So that's fantastic. Now this is something I know that you and your organizations, if you could just remind us what organizations you're with, have been working for a long time. Was this a hard sell? Did you have to convince people was it hard to convince people to go for this, or was it kind of like people jumped on it as soon as they heard about it?
So it's not a hard sell. So my organization, just to go into that for a minute, is called Ready for 100, and it's a campaign of the Sierra Club to ask cities to commit to 100% renewable energy. And so far there's 168 cities around the country, plus several states and counties, and D.C. and Puerto Rico have all made this commitment. And in Ohio, it's Cleveland, Cincinnati, and a couple of suburbs around Cleveland. So we started talking to Columbus about this back in 2017. And we've been, just basically doing a lot of things like collecting 5,000 signatures on our petition and doing a lot of tabling at events and organizing events and holding community dialogues and film discussions and talking to city leaders. And basically it was like, well, that's, for a long time, the response was, how is this possible? How can anyone do this? But as other cities were making this commitment, it was more of a thing of prioritizing. Cities have a lot going on, especially, with other issues. And so it was just a matter of whether or not to prioritize it. But the aggregation, program gave the city a way to do this, and city council was responsible for putting it on the ballot, but they also talked with the mayor and got the mayor on board with it. And so just to explain what aggregation is, in case your listeners don't know.
Yes, I was about to ask you to do that.
Okay, so it sounds like an abstract concept, but it's a program that's been around in Ohio since 1999. There's over 400 cities that have done this, but not for renewables mainly. So what it does is allow a city or a county or a township to pool together its customers and negotiate with utilities on behalf of the customers for a low energy price. It was really envisioned to lower prices. And so hundreds of communities across Ohio have done this, and to negotiate on behalf of their residents, they have to pass a ballot initiative, which is why that was on our ballot. And then residents can opt out if they want to, but most don't. And so that way you get kind of a way to do a bulk purchase rate. And that's basically what aggregation is. It's like a Costco, but for electricity. And then the city puts out an RFP, request for proposals to utilities, and say, okay, what are you going to get me when I can deliver you these, whatever it is, 100,000 customers? What kind of price and what kind of energy are you going to give me? But what Columbus did, and then Grove City followed suit, is Columbus's RFP says, okay, not only do I have to have a good price on this energy, it needs to come from 100% renewable energy, and that renewable energy needs to be built in state and preferably in central Ohio. And it has to be 100% solar and wind. And then Columbus went a step further and said, and also, what are you going to do for 8 opportunity neighborhoods? And it named these neighborhoods. So the utilities that put in a bid for the RFP had to say, okay, how are they going to do 100% renewable? How are they going to build it out in state? How are they going to help 8 opportunity neighborhoods? And Columbus got 4 submissions for the RFP and chose AEP. And that's what AEP is doing.
American Electric Power, the power company.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and AEP is, kind of has seen the writing on the wall regarding energy and is moving heavily into renewables. They have probably a dozen projects in the pipeline that, some of them have already been approved, but, they all have to still go through the Ohio Power Siting Board and, community hearings and so forth to be approved. But they are looking to build a lot of wind and solar energy around the state with several installations in central Ohio. And so with the Columbus contract, they will build out 700 megawatts of wind and solar specific. This will be new wind and solar specifically to supply Columbus. And that's going to create jobs, and that's going to clean up our grid in Ohio, which, as you know, is very dirty. We're the 6th highest carbon-emitting state. Columbus is the 14th largest city in the country. This will be the 3rd largest aggregation project in the country, the largest in the Midwest, and it's all going to be for renewable energy.
Wow,
and then Grove City is it's smaller, so it's 15 megawatts, and they have not put out an RFP yet. They were waiting till after this passes, but that'll be the next step for Grove City, is to write a request for proposals and put that out for utilities to bid on. But the city leaders there have said their intent is for it to be 100% renewable, similar to Columbus.
Wow, that's great. An effort like this, where you've got to collect thousands of petition signatures and so forth, was this largely a volunteer-driven thing? Was it? Did you guys have money to hire professional petition gatherers? How was it? How did you physically get it done?
It was 100% volunteer. I'm a volunteer, and I've probably put in at least 20 hours a week into this campaign for the last 4 years.
Wow.
And all of the people who helped with this, we had a few people that have been there like most of this time, but for most part, like volunteers come in for, several months to a year or something, and then they find something else, or they move out, move to a different region or something. But we've had some amazing volunteers, and we just worked those festivals, like Columbus has during not this past summer, but this was the summer before. Thankfully, we didn't get hit with COVID because most of the festivals got canceled in 2020. But in 2019 and 2018, we were at all of these enormous festivals, like every single week, collecting signatures.
Mm-hmm. So, all right. So now I have to ask the question: how does it feel to have this culmination of all this effort and so successfely?
It's very gratifying. So when I started this in 2017, I didn't really realize exactly how this would be done, and
you didn't know what you were getting yourself in for. That's what you're saying.
Pretty much, I didn't. And so I thought about this because this kind of, I guess, came up for me in 2015 because I went to Paris for the Paris climate talks, and one of the events, the second day of that, was mayors of 1,000 cities gathered and committed to 100% renewable energy. And most of those cities were in Europe. Like maybe a handful of those 1,000 were in the United States. But they made that commitment. I thought, well, Columbus needs to do that. And then fast forward to 2017, and Sierra Club was launching this Ready for 100 campaign. So I just jumped in and said, we're going to do this in Columbus. And I didn't know how long it would take or how it would work. And I'll say about the aggregation program, it's only legal in 9 states. So this is one place where Ohio actually has decent energy laws, better than most states. And so this is something that can be done in any city in Ohio, aggregation for 100% renewable. If the city has not already passed the ballot initiative, they would need to do that. But a lot of cities have, and they're either aggregated for fossil fuels or they just let it lapse and they're not using it. So what people in Ohio can do is talk to their city leadership about, find out, does your city have aggregation? And if it does, when does that contract come up for renewal? And, ask them to move it to 100% renewable with local build-out, because it's really hard to argue against that. It creates jobs, it cleans the environment, it improves our health. It's using this aggregation to really leverage a lot of things.
Well, that's great. Now, did you know about aggregation when you started, or is that something you sort of figured out in the process?
We learned about that as we went. So
okay. All right.
I recently got a master's in public policy and environment and natural resources, and it was kind of in the process of doing the research for the master's paper that I found that out, and that, we have this amazing program. And so we started talking to the city about that. And that, and then we had we had city council people in both Columbus and Grove City who basically took up the mantle of that, and they were champions of that, and
all right.
got that, basically got it pushed through the city leadership and put onto the ballot, and got the mayor's support.
Well, that's wonderful. That's cool. Now, we actually have a caller. We're gonna go to him, and I think this caller wants to disagree with you, and I'm not sure on what grounds, Cathy. But I'm going to be right here with you. Yes, caller.
Good morning to both of you.
Could we have your first name?
Sure, it's Kevin.
Kevin. Hi, Kevin.
Good morning. Just wanted to give my 2 cents.
Okay.
I was in the business of selling electricity, natural gas, in the state of Ohio and Michigan. And the aggregation programs, frankly, aren't what they are, what they're set out to be. Meaning, the electricity providers love the idea of having no competition. They don't want any competition. So when they have to give you one price, you're stuck with it for the whole year. When there's a commodity and it goes up and down and fluctuates. So I find that doesn't really work for a lot of people. I know specifically in Michigan it doesn't work for people. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing based upon the renewables. I'm 100% for that. But this just allows the big electricity companies to basically maintain their position, their business model, which is we own all the solar fields. I'm not sure how that's better for the local community.
We'll let Cathy give a response to that, Kevin. Hold on just a second. So,
thank you.
Cathy, what do you say to that kind of that criticism?
Well, a few different things. First is that it is an open RFP process at the beginning. So Columbus had 4 utilities bidding on this and chose one. Then secondly,
so there was competition there, is what you're saying.
There was competition with that. And the other utilities, they were either not offering renewables or they were offering renewable energy certificates, which aren't terrible. They're supporting renewable energy somewhere, but it's not local build-out. And the Columbus RFP specifically asked for local build-out. So that's why AEP won that. So that's kind of the first point. The second point is within the contract in Columbus, there are ways to adjust the price. At certain points they will be looking at the price and adjusting it. And then thirdly, anyone can opt out at any time with no penalty. So if somebody looks at the price and decides I'm not interested in paying that, they can get out of it. So the choice is always with the person, with the customer.
All right.
So, the aggregation, and I guess fourthly, it depends. There's a lot in the aggregation contract, depending on how each city writes it. But one thing Columbus wrote into it was that it will be generating money for community grants. And these community grants, they haven't really been decided yet in Columbus what they will do, but they're talking to people. And a lot of people have expressed strong interest in community solar, in incentives to put on solar panels, in grants to have energy efficiency and renewable energy upgrades of community centers and schools, and also addressing the split incentive for renters and tenants in low-income areas. So a lot of low-income people rent, and they're in very inefficient buildings, and they're paying high utility bills, but the landlords won't upgrade because they don't pay the utility bills. And so, addressing that split incentive, and this grant money will be used for things that will really help the community. So that's how Columbus wrote it. Other cities may not write their aggregation that way, but if Ready for 100 is involved, we have kind of a package of things we're asking cities to do. And so what we're asking cities for is 100% renewable through local build-out and, some kind of attention to energy equity, whether it's through community grants or however that wants to be written into the contract.
All right. Well, thanks very much. I think, Kevin, that she kind of responded to your concerns there.
She did. And one quick thing I would say, a couple of response to her things is, one, I've never seen the government negotiate a better contract for the general public. Doesn't happen. Matter of fact, the companies look forward to it as a giant payday when the government gets involved.
Well,
two, choice already. We have choice. So when you got four companies offering you electricity, isn't it better to have 10? Isn't it better to have 15? I think that's where the real competition in that drives the price down. So I have to disagree that 4 is your best way to go, because I know right now if I got 10 people out there, 10 companies, somebody's going to give me a much better rate. And then lastly, if I save the money, why is it going to someone else as a grant? It should go back into my pocket, not into somebody else's. I'm not nor do I want to basically subsidize somebody else's improvements. That shouldn't be borne on my account.
All right. Well, thanks for your comments, Kevin.
Thank you. I enjoyed the program.
I'm glad you.
Yeah, actually, this idea that the rate that the city government negotiates is always higher, that's simply not true. Worthington aggregated for 100% renewable energy in 2018. The program went into effect in 2019. In the first 10 months, residents and businesses saved $100,000.
All right.
That's a small community, and we're expected to save.
Oh, well, all right. Unfortunately, we just lost both Kevin and Cathy Cowan-Becker, but we're happy that we had the call, and we're happy for Cathy and Kevin's concerns. I'm glad you got on the air and got to air them, but it sounds like this is a good deal for the people of Columbus, and I think that they have done a great thing there with this passage. And let's see, who do we have back on? Oh, Cathy, are you back on?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened.
No, sorry
about
that.
Hung up.
Yeah, we got cut off for a second. So, yeah, well, I think you've answered Kevin's concerns pretty clearly there. But I just in closing, since we're reaching the end of the time for the interview here, is this something you think could be applied in the other cities in Ohio? Do you think this is something maybe other cities, perhaps even a city like Toledo, might look at?
Yeah, I think they should. And we've actually got a Ready for 100 team in Toledo. So Toledo is already part of an aggregation program that's with about 14 other cities and communities, but it's largely I think it may be all for fossil fuels. So that's what our Toledo team is trying to do, is to talk to them about using this program to move to renewable energy.
Well, and I think it's also an important point that increasingly the renewable price is actually the cheapest price. It's solar and wind now are cheaper than the natural gas has been in the past, and that's
a very good point.
So it's both economical and environmental for everybody. So, All right,
Yeah.
Cathy. Well, thank you very much for coming on, and thanks for talking with Kevin and me, and hopefully we'll have you on some more in the future. But any last words before we move on the show?
Just that, especially if you're in a state that has aggregation, you can do this. But there's also a lot of other things that will need to be done to get us to sustainability and cut our carbon emissions in half and ensure a livable planet. There's many things in all areas of city operations that need to be done.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and congratulations again.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Bye. All right. That was Cathy Cowan-Becker with Ready for 100. And so now we're going to hear from our sponsors, those of us the companies and so forth that make this show possible. And our sponsor for this hour is the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several different ways you can find out what's going on in the Wood County Parks. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Another is to go to their website, which is simply wcparks.org. That stands, of course, for woodcountyparks.org, wcparks.org. And you can go to Facebook. They have a very nice Facebook page, which they update frequently. And finally, they have an app where you can just get on your phone and say to yourself, I wonder what's going on at the Wood County Parks this week. And you just click on your app, and it'll tell you. You go to the App Store and search for WC Parks. So that's the Wood County Park District. For Green Future is also brought to you by our patrons. And these are people who've gone on to patreon.com, and they found our page there, searched for a Green Future. And on that page, you see different levels of membership with a lot of cute, very cute pictures. And you might want to check it out just for the pictures, because we have some nice pictures on there. But those who get past the pictures and decide to go ahead and become patrons, they choose a monthly amount. They click on that. It comes out of their checking account every month. It comes into our checking account every month. And it's one of the main things that helps us keep the show on the air. And I wanted to welcome our newest patron, Tony. Tony has signed up as a patron and has made that commitment to help keep For a Green Future on the air. And if you want to join Tony, you just go to patreon.com. That's Patreon. Okay, now I believe we have been joined by Rebecca. Rebecca, are you on the line?
I am on the line. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. So, what did you think of our guest there, Cathy Cowan-Becker?
That was really cool what they did.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of people. Largest city in Ohio. That's a lot of wind and solar. I hope that they can get beyond the anti-wind laws that are here in Ohio, the ones with the unnatural amounts of setback that make it so difficult to make a wind farm. And I also hope they can get past the siting board, the power siting board, which under the quote-unquote guidance of Sam Randazzo has vetoed so many big solar projects, including AEP's largest solar project. He just, at the last minute, just said, nah, let's not do that. But if they can get past the state government and make this happen, that will be a wonderful
thing. What was the rationale behind the setback laws? Is it because they're aesthetically unappealing, supposedly?
They made up this phantom, this phony danger of wind turbine blades flying off and flying through the air. And they were in the debates. They were saying they could fly up to a mile, and they painted this phony picture of a little girl playing outside in her own backyard when suddenly a wind turbine blade from a mile away comes and kills her. And
Okie
they
dokie.
use that kind of argument, and that just doesn't happen with modern wind turbines. They're so carefully engineered. I've seen pictures of modern wind turbines that got hit by tornadoes and destroyed. But what happens is that those blades, which are fiberglass, they're polymaterials that when the tornado hit this wind turbine, the blades broke, but then they just dangled, kind of like I have fiberglass ski poles when I go cross-country skiing, and if one of those break, they don't just snap in half and go flying into pieces. When you break these reinforced fiberglass polymers, they break, but the reinforced fibers stay connected, and so they just sort of dangle there. And so this imaginary thing, which he repeated, I may say, during the House Bill 6 arguments, they just used imaginary, fake, 100% false arguments like that one to justify it.
Plus, I'm guessing if this little girl lives in rural Ohio, she's already facing danger from nuclear plants, danger from fracking, huge amounts of chemicals in her water, which are probably going to give her cancer at some point in her life. If she lives on a farm, she's got all this farm machinery around, which there's actually a fairly high rate of children being injured working on farms. Mm-hmm. And yet none of that stuff matters. We got to protect her from the windmills.
No, yeah, nitrates in her well water. No, none of that real dangers to children, little girls living out in the country were brought up. But this imaginary phantom idea of wind turbines throwing blades and having them fly through the air. In other words, they were in. It looks okay. Now I have to say allegedly, and it looks like this was something that First Energy didn't want, and so instructed their legislators to block, and so then they came up with whatever kind of story they could to block them. That's what it looks like to me. I can't say that's actually what happened.
Yeah.
Until there's
that smell.
Until somebody else gets arrested and confesses, like they did with House Bill 6. But all right. So welcome back, Rebecca. We had a couple weeks here where we weren't able to hook up, so I'm glad to have you back on the line with us.
Yeah, the stars were against us or something.
But so now you've got something here. You've got a story you researched about corn, which is a very timely topic since the combines are all out in the fields harvesting the corn right now. I've been seeing them when I ride my bike out in the country and when I take walks and stuff. Yep. So you've got some stuff about corn.
I want to talk about corn because it relates both to the Mexican Day of the Dead, which we had, and also looking forward to Thanksgiving, where poor Squano made the terrible, terrible mistake of teaching us how to to farm stuff, including corn, which led to the survival of Europeans on this continent. But that was not a good idea. But it was a nice impulse on his part. He was a nice guy. He just did not know who he was dealing with. So yeah, I want to research corn, and it's a pretty common thing, but it's kind of interesting. It's commonly called maize, which is from the Spanish maíz, which is originally they got that from the Taíno Indians in Puerto Rico. They have a word maíz for it. And we're just talking about the Taínos because Father de las Casas was trying to get people not to genocide them way back in the 1400s or something.
Oh, right.
Yeah, they're mostly gone, but Puerto Ricans, if you know any Puerto Ricans, they'll call themselves Taínos because they are part Taíno still. But yeah, maize is technically a cereal grain, although apparently its inflorescence means flower, right? Its entire ear is apparently a flower, and the little individual kernels are fruit. So I don't understand. I got to do some more reading. But that's what the article I found said. It originated in Mexico 10,000 years ago, either in the Tehuacan Valley in central Mexico or the Balsas River Valley in south central Mexico. They're saying it's the second thing now. And apparently the oldest varieties, there used to be a whole bunch of varieties that the Aztecs used, and there's a lot of them are still surviving in the Mexican highlands. The kernels are actually fruit. I said that. Mostly sweet corn, the kind that you actually boil and eat is sweet corn. But field corn, what they call, is used for ethanol, corn syrup, animal fodder, corn flour for tortillas, corn oil, and bourbon. Bourbon is made out of corn. I don't know why it's called bourbon. They don't have corn. Corn doesn't come from France. That's crazy. But anyway, but apparently there's over 1 billion tons made per year, and 85% of U.S. corn is unfortunately genetically modified.
Oh, mm-hmm. Yeah, that is unfortunate. Yeah, we have a story about genetic modification coming up in a little bit, but yeah, go on.
That's good. If we have another little minute here, the Mexicans, who are kind of agricultural geniuses in a lot of ways, they came up with something called nixtamalization, which I don't know if the Aztecs invented, but it's or they got it from they got a lot of stuff from the Olmecs and the Toltecs a long time ago. But yeah, it's from the Nahuatl words nextly for ashes and tamal for unformed corn dough, which I'm guessing also relates to the word tamale. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's this process which is used to make corn into flour, basically, where you soak it in an alkaline solution, often lime water, and then wash it and hull it, and at that point you've basically got grits. You've got, what's the fancy word for grits? I forget. Hominy.
Okay.
Yes.
You've
got hominy, and this has all kinds of benefits. It improves the flavor, obviously. It takes out something called mycotoxins, which are a bunch of different kinds of fungi which have bad health effects, although one of them, at least, some of them you can use for medicinal purposes also. It softens the corn wall, the cell walls of the corn, and therefore keeps it from, quote, going right through you, as we all know corn does. It freezes niacin, which is really good for you because it prevents something called pellagra, which you seriously don't want, which will happen if you eat a lot of corn, almost nothing but corn, and you don't break it down or anything. It also makes the protein stick together to form dough. And the really good thing about it is that nutritionally it has all kinds of benefits. Niacin for pellagra, it improves the balance among amino acids, which means really, and I read someplace it frees up like this one important amino acid, which when you add some beans to it, you got a complete protein, which is why corn and beans extremely popular. It's specifically broken down into, by this process, corn and beans, very popular in Mexico, because basically you add a little bit of hot peppers to that for vitamin C, and you're going to live forever. You are good to go. Also, it absorbs a lot of minerals in the process of soaking in the lime, which go into the body, like calcium, iron, zinc, copper. So, yeah, eat more tortillas. It's a good thing.
All right, good. And I have to point out that Rebecca's claim that you'll live forever has not been evaluated by the FDA.
Okay.
Right.
I've not been paid off by the tortilla industry or anything like that either, so I'm breaking even here.
All right.
Well, yeah, also they invented chinampas, which are like the floating, quote, floating gardens, unquote, around that the Aztecs had, where they didn't really float. They were actually anchored to the bottom. They made that they looked like they were floating because they had like little canoe thingies, paths going through them. So you get your thing to cultivate your thing by. And these things are as big as football fields. I always assumed they were tiny, but they were not. They're very big, like built up in shallow lake beds. Mm-hmm. And they had like the channels would have to get dredged once a year, otherwise they'd fill up and you couldn't get your canoe through over there. And then when you did that, you got a bunch of super rich soil from the lake bottom, including probably some human waste that just got piled up on the fields, and that was a really great fertilizer, so they were super duper productive.
All right. So we learned,
smart folks, I'm telling you.
So we learned a lot from them, and without corn, I think our society is kind of almost built on corn. There's so much of it. It's such a staple in so many ways. Yeah, cool.
And my dad who spent time in Germany told me that basically Europeans think corn is cattle food, mostly.
Yeah, it's a lot of the American foods were kind of looked at askance when they first went over to Europe, but then most of them got accepted. So, all right, well, thanks, Rebecca, and now it's time to move on to Eco News. We've got some interesting stories we got to get through. And I'm going to start with talking about another referendum that passed this past Tuesday, and that is the state of Colorado passed a referendum that said that wolves have to be reintroduced into the state before 2023. And this one wasn't a blowout like the aggregation bill that Cathy Cowan-Becker was talking about. It was a close race. It was 50.3% to 49.7%, and it pretty much broke down that the people in the more urban areas wanted the wolves back and the people in the more rural areas didn't. But it passed, and they definitely have a problem there with elk and deer overpopulation because the wolves were exterminated in Colorado all the way back around the 1940s, 1950s. And so the science and the scientists say that if they bring the wolves back, they'll bring the elk and deer populations back down again to manageable levels and stop all the overgrazing, which causes erosion and all the problem. So it passed. There's 17 million acres of public lands in Colorado, where now by starting in 2023, wolves will be able to roam. So even though the Trump administration has tried to essentially exterminate any wolves that might be hanging around by eliminating their endangered species protection, the people of the state of Colorado have said they want them back. And the main opposition to it came from the Colorado Cattlemen's Association, but they have finally conceded, even though the voting was very close. But this law has in it all kinds of remuneration for farmers if they lose livestock to the wolves. And, if you really are rancher, if you're really into ranching animals for money, I think that the idea that you would have a guaranteed price for one of your cattle or one of your sheep if it got eaten by a wolf, just speaking financially, that's actually better than if you put in all that investment and grow them for the years it takes, and then who knows, maybe the market's bottomed out that month that you have to sell it and you don't get anything for it. If you just look at it in terms of economics, the Cattlemen's Association should be going for this, but
there's a thing too. Okay, I think I saw about this on television. There's a thing where it's not just that there are too many elk; it's that predators have the effect of keeping them moving, so they don't graze any one place too much.
Yeah, they keep moving.
Yeah,
and they are much shyer. In an area with zero predators, an animal like a deer will literally spend all day out grazing and just eating lots of stuff wherever they're at. But if they know there's predators around, they're going to be what they're supposed to be, which is, and this is one of my favorite words, crepuscular, which means they come out at the dawn and the dusk, would be when it's hard for the wolves to see them, and during the day they just hide because otherwise they might get eaten. And that's the kind of natural behavior you want in your large grazing animals.
You want to keep your deer nervous, essentially. Nervous deer is good deer.
Yeah, you got to keep them on the edge. That's how they're supposed to be. And then there wouldn't be experiences like I had the other day where I'm just sitting in the backyard and a huge buck comes walking in. But it's better for everybody if deer act like deer in the ecosystem. So there's some good news and some more good news. We were talking about genetically modified organisms. There is a frankenfish. There's a salmon that they created by inserting genes into it from both. This is Atlantic salmon, and they took Atlantic salmon and they mutated them by sticking genes in from Chinook salmon from the west coast, and also from an animal called the ocean pout, which is kind of an eel with a big mouth. It's not exactly an eel. It's closely related to eels. But they did this at a secret lab in Panama, up in the mountains. Up in the mountains.
This is sounding great.
I know. Genetic modification behind, in a compound that nobody knows where it is or how to get to it. And
like the beginning of a horror movie.
Yeah, kind of. So, but they created these fish, these genetically modified salmon, and the big thing about them is that they're big things, that they grow 3 times as fast as normal salmon. And so, of course, if you're a salmon farmer and you got your salmon growing in tanks and you want them to get real big real fast, these would be the salmon for you. And the FDA approved their salmon. However, it has been pointed out that if those salmon escape into the wild, they could pretty much destroy the whole ecosystem for a couple reasons. One, that they eat a lot more and a lot different. But two, we have a strange situation with genetically modified organisms where they can outcompete the natural organisms, because they get bigger, faster, in this case, and so they crowd out the natural salmon, crowd them away from food. They win when it comes time to mate and stuff because they're big and bulky, but they can also be less adapted to the environment because a big, young, bulky salmon like that might be easier fodder for, let's say, killer whales or some other predators or sharks. So you can have the genetically modified organism can both get in there, crowd out the natural version, and then die out themselves. So if you do it wrong, if you let some of these genetically modified organisms out they can literally remove their species from the wild, which is terrible. But the FDA approved it, but there was a court case brought by a bunch of organizations, and the judge agreed that this violated NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. And the FDA said, well, we're the FDA, that we cleared it as food. We don't care about the environment or its effect on the ecology. But these organizations and NEPA says anything the federal government does has to take into account the impact on the environment. And so a federal judge has blocked it. So we'll see.
Whew.
All right, close one. As I reported before, on November 4th, the U.S. formally pulled out of the Paris Accord. So we are now a rogue nation because 189 other countries have stayed in that accord, which limits greenhouse gas emissions by the countries. And so pretty much we're no longer a leader. But President-elect Biden, first time I've used that phrase, President-elect Biden has promised that we're going to sign back in on it and get in on it again. Just a quick mention. I got to rush through these because we're running out of time. Quick mention that the 28th named storm of the year, which is a record, Tropical Storm Eta, which had been Hurricane Eta when it hit the Nicaragua and Central America there. Tropical Storm Eta is bearing down on Florida. And if you wonder why it's named Eta, it's because first they went through all the names that they had come up with for hurricanes this year and tropical storms. Then now they're going through the Greek alphabet. And so they've gone through alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, and zeta. And so now they're on Eta. So next would come theta and iota. But right now, as the 28th named storm, it ties the all-time record for the number of storms this year. And if we get another one, if we get theta, and there are a couple candidates, hurricane season goes till the end of November, then we will have broken the record and we will have more hurricanes and storms than ever in recorded history. So don't forget about that. Even as we debate, even as we have elections, the machinery of climate change continues to grind on, and we keep getting these enhanced storms and more storms, and so the threat is very real. And now I want to do an odd little story about what they call green prescriptions. This story was in Science Daily News, and it was on the 6th of November. The title is Green Prescriptions Could Undermine Benefits of Spending Time in Nature. And what this means is simply that they did a study, and it reaffirmed the basic idea that if you're suffering mental depression or anxiety, time in nature, going out in the woods, helps relieve the symptoms. It definitely improves your mental health to get out into the forest. They reaffirmed that. But they also found that the more someone felt pressured to go out into the woods, like people were telling them, you're depressed, you got to get out in the woods, go, 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 or I'll drive you there, or the more they felt like someone else was pushing them to do it, the less benefit it had. So
self-righteous jerks are bad for your health, is what I'm hearing.
right. No matter how
I believe it.
Yeah, no matter how helpful they think they're being, if they're forcing you to get out into the woods. So I just wanted to say that if you're somebody who right now is kind of anxious or depressed about the loss of Trump as president and Biden becoming the president, get out into the woods, if you want, or not. It's your decision. No pressure. But research does show that if you are up to it and you initiate it yourself, it can really help you. So I would advise you, but I'm not going to, push you to do it. If you want to do it, that's fine. All right. So that's all the stories I wanted to get through. We're at 8:58, and just time to get in the letter from the future. All right, here we go. This is a letter from my great-great-granddaughter who's writing us from the year 2300. Dear GGG, it wasn't until I sat down to write this that I realized I've had a really good week. The new science facility is up and running. 112 scientists from all different disciplines focused on learning as much as they can about a completely new life form. When scientists really get engaged in research, egos slip away and the sheer joy of discovering new things takes over. I can count on one hand the number of administrative crises I've had to deal with this past week, and the new science facility is up and running beautifully. Michael and I actually had time to go cross-country skiing this past week. The bay is frozen over with a thick sheet of ice, and we had a fresh snowfall, so Michael and I skied out into the bay until the research facility was just a dot on the horizon behind us, taking turns breaking the trail for each other. It was intensely cold, but the sun on the white snow was brilliant, and we were warmed by the skiing. The silence was so deep that the sounds of our breath seemed to disappear into the universe. He leaned forward and kissed me. Then we headed back. I know I'm living in your future, but for the first time in a long time, I started thinking about my future again. Love you, GGG. Marie I.
Yay.
Okay, there we go. That's the show, and we're out of time. Thanks for listening, as always. And this is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we're signing off. Fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!